everybody. Welcome to Transcendence Talks podcast. Today's guest is a trailblazer in the world of feminine embodiment and liberation. Fiona McCoss is a woman's mentor, facilitator, and founder of the Wild Feminine movement, guiding women around the world to reclaim their bodies, their power, and their pleasure. Through retreats, mentorship, and leadership training, Fiona invites women to dismantle the conditioning of patriarchy and reconnect with the untamed intelligence of the feminine. Her work lives at the intersection of shadow work, erotic embodiment, archetypal wisdom, and radical self expression. And she's known for helping women step into their most unapologetic and liberated selves. Today, we're diving into pleasure, power, feminine leadership, and what it really means to come home to your body. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you so much.
I am so excited to have you here because, for selfish reasons today, I'll be honest, I feel like I have lived a life primarily out of my masculine, and it's only been in the last 3 years that it's felt safe to start exploring my feminine energy and my sexuality. And so I was so excited to have this conversation and so curious to know what led you down this path yourself.
I mean, when I think about, my origin story, let's say, I remember even way back when I was like a young girl, like 6, 7, I was so obsessed with the female anatomy, with all things pleasure and periods and like everything. And I would be hounding my mom, like looking at her box of tampons, being like, Mom, like, what are these? Like, tell me where they go. Tell me about everything. And she'd always be like, well, wait till you're a bit older. And I was just so hungry to know. And I remember having my first orgasm in a pool with, a foam noodle at the time,
Yeah.
not knowing that that was what I was experiencing, but knowing like deep down that it was something shameful and that I shouldn't tell anyone and that I need to hide it, that I know how to connect with my body in that way. And so it was really interesting to like piece all these little bits together, the further down my journey I got, just for having these rememberings of being so young and not necessarily knowing the imprints that I had, but knowing deep down in my psyche that my sexuality was wrong, my pleasure was wrong. It was something to keep hidden. It was something to not talk about. And then obviously like life happened and I ended up in the corporate world and went down the whole expected route of a woman, found a steady long-term boyfriend, and turned out to be a little bit toxic, and ended up just like following the rules that are kind of set in place for women, find get a good job, find a good partner, get a house. And I was 25 and I had this massive awakening and I was just like, what the actual fuck is my life? Like I just really woke up and I felt like I was in a cage, like a gilded cage.
Wow.
And I was like, I need to get out. And it was this wild woman awakening within me, like howling to be like, you need to like get out, sister, because you are just being so stifled, you're being so suffocated. And so, yeah, I just followed those little wild whispers and ended up leaving London, left my job, went on this like massive, just solo journey. Didn't really know where it was taking me, found my now long-term partner, ended up having a massive pivot of my career, found my way into coaching, found my way into embodiment, and now teaching women to reconnect with their sexuality and their bodies. It's so interesting just to think back to just the little passion that I had as a young girl to just heal that wound of why is being in our bodies and being in our pleasure so wrong.
Okay, I want to drill down on that because you're absolutely right. It sounds like, I mean, you're not talking about trauma. You're talking about an early activation of your sexuality, of an embodied experience. And even without words, it was shrouded in shame. And I'm curious to hear your beliefs around that because from what I've studied, what I've understood, it is written, that shame is written in our heritage. It seems to be passed down through the lineages of DNA, through the suppression of the feminine, and whether it's taught or spoken of, which I'm sure it wasn't at that early age, we seem to fundamentally know, or there's a transmission that happens around that. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. How did you know it was shameful before words?
Yeah, and it's exactly, there was just something obviously in my psyche that was like, don't tell anyone. And I didn't grow up in a religious household. So for a lot of people, they grow up in the confines of like, they have like the Bible drilled into them, which very clearly states, women are born into sin, that your flesh is something to detach from, that, the only way to the divine is up and out rather than down and in.
Yes.
And I didn't grow up in that kind of an environment. So it must just have been all of these societal kind of imprints. Like, I don't remember my mom ever saying anything. I don't remember my nana or any kind of anyone in my family having holding that kind of, repressive energy, but it must just have been so collective. But when we think of it, largely it's like, just think of the world that we live in. Like, we're seeing just so much distortion and contortion of female sexuality and female bodies that, it was probably then my mom, without meaning to. My mom is, amazing. And I'm so grateful for so much of what she's supported me in my journey. But who knows what she got taught around her body. And so who knows what she may have said flippantly one time. Even the way that girls talk about their bodies, we don't call our vulvas. We have all these types of silly infantile names for these parts of our bodies that we don't actually have a real connection to them. It's like, we're really detached from our bodies from such a young age. It's like, oh, don't put your fingers down there, don't scratch, don't touch. It's like all of these little languaging that we're like, oh no, I'm not supposed to put my energy or my awareness down there.
Right. Right. So, how did you begin? So, 25 years old, you have this awakening, and there's this recognition that a deconstruction has to happen, because I think before we move into embodiment, we have to dissolve, right? Start to deconstruct the patterns, the paradigms, the messages, whether unconscious or societal. How did you embark on that journey?
I mean, it definitely didn't happen overnight. It was a long, a journey of multiple years of like unpicking and unlearning and, veils lifting and suddenly seeing the world that you're living in just through a totally different lens and realizing the lies that you've been sold. And, all of these shoulds and expectations are just like absolute bullshit that we've just agreed to follow, like the good girls that we've been brought up to be. And so it did take a while and a lot of like challenging. And I swung full pendulum the other way, like full feral, like moved to Costa Rica, didn't wear any makeup, didn't shave my armpits or shave my legs for like a year, like went fully out of the system and was like, I need to find who I am and what my real expression is, and kind of rejected any kind of, what would be the system or any kind of normal life.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of slowly re-entered like normal Western world and came back to the UK and like came back and, bought a house and all these kinds of things. But doing it with just a lot more intention, because with there is so much to unlearn, but then there has to kind of be a balance of like, well, how can then I bring my awakened self into the modern world without just choosing another bubble to live in where everybody's in an echo chamber and everybody's like actually not really got 2 feet on the ground. And so it's kind of like, how can I, bring what I know to the normal people and actually just have conversations and help inspire awakenings in other people by just being more authentically ourselves and daring to not follow the rules that we've been told that we have to follow, because they just serve the patriarchy. They don't
Mm-hmm.
serve the individual, even though, yeah, we're not offered a blueprint of how to live. We're offered this one as in we're not offered a blueprint for women to live. So a lot of my work is like supporting women coming back into what I call their feminine blueprint, the essence of who they really are through their power, through their body, through their pleasure, which will look and feel different for all of us. But ultimately, how do we detoxify ourselves from these patriarchal beliefs and systems that are not the truth? They are not ours. We've just been indoctrinated by them. And so there's little voices in our head that we think are ours are not.
You must be up against a lot of resistance within the women that you're working with. I can only imagine, right? When you have a woman who is curious and wants to explore who she authentically is, but she has the voice in her head of the church, the voice in her head of, maybe that's even a threat to her partner or her relationship. What does this mean? Maybe it's a threat to the family and cultural norms. I imagine it's a journey for everybody. How do you guide women through this process?
I mean, every journey looks really different, and we move with tenderness, and we move with a shit ton of compassion, and we move slowly, and we create a lot of space for integration, because this work is really big work, the work of unlearning and starting to really see all the ways that you've been lied to, or see all the ways that you've been knowingly or unknowingly kind of living in a cage. And then you suddenly get to the bars of the cage and you're like rattling them, and you're like, oh my God, I have to get out. And you know that the key is in your hand. Also,
Yeah.
you're not waiting for someone to give you the key. The key has always been in your hand. So
That.
choosing to like put your arm around the cage and unlock it and step out is massive. It's like life
Yeah.
changing.
Just that shift alone. Like, I feel like what you're describing is a shift from victim mentality, saying, I can't change because of them, versus I can. It's just that taking full responsibility for my change looks like taking radical responsibility for my life and what happens as a result of this change. And that right there can be a huge paradigm shift for people, because I think fear really keeps us locked behind those bars of it's so much easier just to be a victim and to say, well, society's this way, so I guess I'm stuck. And that alone is a radical change for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's super easy to just be able to point out and be like, "Hey, they, rather than actually like turn your finger back and be like, okay, shit, what do I have to do actually to change my life and to change my circumstance? And I think so many women forget that they have agency and choice. And so for a lot of women, it's just waking up and just saying, like, okay, how am I choosing to be in this situation, or am I choosing to do something different? And for a lot of women, it's like, because the system is so set up where, women are the ones who, if you choose to have kids, often you become reliant on your partner or husband or baby daddy to financially support you. We've lost so many systems of support that really allow women to be, I don't even want to say independent, because being independent is not always the thing that we need, but at least to have her own financial stability, her own community, her own, people around her that will really have her back, versus just being dependent on the person that you're married to or the person that is your baby daddy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which is why so many women fall into the trap of becoming so masculine, playing the man's game, because that's how we've learned to succeed in the world. That's how we learn how to get the good career. That's how we learn how to, climb the corporate ladder and make the most money. But it's just sacrificing our authentic feminine selves. And at
It
some
is.
point, it cracks, and it's just like, oh my God, I'm burning out. I have all these physical symptoms. I'm disconnected from my sensuality. I've lost connection to my sexuality. All these things are happening, all these red flags, but it's sometimes easier to not look at them, or to keep just like blinkers on and not actually do the work of tending to yourself, because it's fucking hard.
It is hard. And so, how does a woman do that in a man's world, right? When society is built and success is defined in this masculine way. When I think about feminine energy, I think about this ability to surrender, to trust. It's about receptivity. What does that look like in this paradigm that we're living in?
I mean, the way I work with the feminine and teach the feminine is she is full spectrum. So we have the receptivity, we have the softness, we have the sensuality, but we also, and what's really forgotten about, like, have the dark,
Yeah.
have the destructive, have the fiery, wild woman, wise woman, witch, those archetypes and those energies that get forgotten about, or that get put into the shadow because they're so misunderstood and demonized. Whereas the world is so used to pedestaling the youth or the beauty or the virginal qualities of the feminine, that the ugly, the raw, the real power that lies in the dark of the feminine is often unintegrated, because it's disrespected and it's misunderstood, and so it becomes distorted. So it's really important to support women to move along this healthy range where you can access all parts of your feminine energy. So at one moment you might be soft and sensual, the other moment you might bare your fangs, tell someone to fuck off, because your wild woman's coming out and you're acting, you're asserting your agency, you're remembering you have choice, you're taking up space. So it is, there is a lot to remember. And obviously each woman comes with her own baggage and her own trauma and her own stories and her own capacity and her own, responsibility. So every woman's journey into her feminine power and sovereignty is different and will take a different length of time. But ultimately, it is possible for every single woman to return back to her true essence For some, it might take a little, more tools than others. It might take
Yeah.
a little longer than others, but it's always possible. And, the feminine awakening is happening. Like we're already way into it. And we are starting to see signs of the patriarchy crumbling. Shit is really coming to head, and people are,
Hmm.
even if you substitute the word feminine for consciousness,
Yeah.
like we're really seeing a rise in consciousness, and we're seeing just shifts in the paradigm, and it
Hmm.
kind of has to get really ugly before it gets really good,
Oh, I
because
feel
it's
that.
all coming to a head right now. And there's so many shitstorms around the world, especially
Yep.
in places of power.
Mm.
And the feminine is really being called, like you said, to like stay surrendered, but stay nurturing, but also like sharpen her fucking fangs
That's
and
it.
sharpen her claws so that she can also go out and fight,
Hmm.
protect, and defend.
And I feel like women are on the front lines of this right now. They're the ones I see speaking up, calling things out, finding their sovereignty, rising into their power. I just released a book last month called Reclaiming Eden. And I did an ayahuasca ceremony and really touched into my own divine feminine essence. And I saw the split between ancient Atlantis and Lemuria, and how Atlantis represented the masculine and Lemuria represented the feminine. And it was the split of the feminine and masculine energy that shook the earth, like the tectonic plates just couldn't hold it, and created the flood. And then civilization was reestablished, but that split remained. And what I saw was that Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene came in to bridge that gap. Like Christ embodied his divine feminine with through the relationship with Mary Magdalene, and was able to harmonize and balance out that energy, and left us a template to restore that to earth, because I believe that men are just as injured by the suppression of the divine feminine as women are, because men can't express their feminine energy in a healthy way because they deny it and repress it. They're disconnected from their hearts. And I feel like this feminine masculine split represents the head heart connection. And I feel like most men are cut off from the neck down, and so many women are too. And so I believe what you're talking about right now is the core wound that humanity is seeking to resolve in this cyclical feminine, right? Feminine time is cyclical, not linear. This cycle, this of time that we're looking to heal, like this old karmic wound that's coming back up. And I mean, we've suppressed the divine mother, that Sophia energy. And so for me, these things that you're talking about might be the most important aspect of healing humanity. And like you said, consciousness as a whole, because I do believe that it was the original injury that's been perpetuated through all known historical time.
Yeah, I can feel that. Yeah, I can
Mhm.
feel there's a lot of truth in that. And I think this is, the real kind of distortion as well. I mean, I'm not a religious woman and a
Mhm.
Christian, but even in the distortion of who Jesus was, and then how Christianity has evolved to become this real patriarchal doctrine and dogma that really has nothing to do with who Jesus was, or he was, healing or sharing his medicine way back when.
Mhm.
And just the fear and how threatened people were by feminine energy and feminine power, that they had to fucking squash it. They had to
That's
write
it.
rules to submit it, to suppress it, to make women submit to men, because they knew women were so powerful, and the feminine was so powerful.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's funny. I don't consider myself a Christian either because of all the distortion within it. But when I look at Christ's example and see the truth of the message, that's exactly it. It was the integration of the feminine, which was so dangerous to the church and to the paradigm, that it was deeply hidden, deeply suppressed, and it's perpetuated this wound that humanity's been facing in an even deeper way. The Gospels of Mary Magdalene were buried. She was called a prostitute instead of the priestess, the healer that she was. I mean, this stuff runs so incredibly deep. But I'm wondering if maybe we can flip it a little bit and almost introduce Kali, right? Like, I'd love to hear your perspective on the dark feminine, and why does the patriarchy fear her so much, and how has she been and what does it look like when she's integrated? That was a million questions, but I'd love to walk down that road.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I feel like, speaking of splits, that there is such a split within women, the light feminine versus the dark feminine. And as I said before, we've been sold the version of woman is the light feminine, is the mother, is the virgin, is this very clean, pure good girl, or the mothering aspect, which is healthy and important to a degree, but it's only as healthy and helpful when we have the integrated dark feminine, because the wise woman, the witch, the hag, the whore, the seductress, or the wild woman all need their place and integration in women's bodies. Because then, if you think the rejection of our sexuality, the rejection of our intuition, the rejection of our inner wisdom, the disconnect from our womb, really the disconnect from our power, as you said, we're so severed from head to body. The root power of women lies in our pelvis, is in our sex, and that is the home of the dark feminine. If you think our womb is the source of the dark feminine, it is the dark, it is the void, it is the cosmic feminine is in the womb. And just think how many women, I think in the US have the highest rates of women having hysterectomies, because doctors are like, oh well, you're over 50, let's just whap it out. There's so much misunderstanding around actually supporting women through perimenopause, into menopause, and into their wisdom years, helping women have empowered childbirth. But there's just such a lack of education around, or connection to, actually this, how sacred our female anatomy is, our pleasure anatomy, our womb. That, think of how many women have issues with their pelvic bowl, with their pelvic floor. And it's all to do, I believe, with this absolute rejection of the dark feminine, because that is where she lives. So we're sent to live in the heart at best, so a lot of the divine feminine movements, beautiful, but they kind of like stay at the heart. They don't actually root down into, the soil of the feminine, which is in our sex, which is in our root, the root of our body.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, when we're shamed from such a young age for, like you said, our consciousness exploring those areas, it immediately creates a disconnected such, I mean, pre-verbally. Look, can we talk about perimenopause for a minute? So, I'm a psychotherapist. I refer women all the time to like naturopaths to start to get their bodies, their hormones in alignment, and to be able to really honor that transition. But I'd love to hear, I mean, because as women, we have these markers throughout our life that come from the womb. They're driven by these archetypal phases that we go through as women. And so I'd love if you could just take us on a journey of how do we integrate that dark feminine? How do we honor these phases of our sexuality throughout a lifespan as females? And there used to be ritual around these things, but there isn't. I mean, like you said, at best, it's the medicalization, which is such a disservice, or there's the pathologizing of these phases, or the labeling them as, something wrong. And I feel like these transitions can be so much easier, even physically, if we knew how to have a healthy container for them emotionally or ritualistically,
Yeah.
archetypal.
Yeah. I think it would be beautiful if we showed our daughters or nieces or, young women in our community and actually celebrated when their first blood came, and spoke to them about the archetypes within their cycle, and taught them about the phases of the moon and how their body reflects the earth and the moon, and actually allowed them to think farther and wider outside of their little teenage bodies that probably are really afraid of all these changes that are happening, and actually help connect them to the wider world and the wider kind of cosmos. And actually also, like, it really just, our fear of periods and our fear of bleeding is like just shows us this complete sterilization that we have, turned our bodies to, that we hate blood. It's okay. Why is our womb blood any different to blood that comes out of a cut on our hand?
Right.
Just this whole idea that anything that comes out of our pussy, our womb, is dirty, is disgusting, is something that needs to be hidden. Even the way that, women were kept out of churches, out of temples, out of sacred rites and rituals. And actually, we are the sacred ones who are bleeding at this time. You should let us in, because we actually have the greatest capacity to receive and connect with the divine, actually. And just this
Yeah.
complete inversion of what is actually true, and keeping women out of spaces where actually, we are the shamans. And then, obviously, the mothering years is the time that is kind of the most revered, because that's when we're fertile, and that's like, our prime time. And then as soon as we've had our babies, it's like we fall off the shelf. we enter perimenopause, and then, women start to wake up to all of this rage. This is really when the wild woman comes in for a lot of women,
Yeah.
end of their 30s, and women just start to feel so fucking angry because they start to realize if they haven't had an awakening before, it's like the veil is like lifted just overnight in an instant, and all of these years of repressed emotions, suppressed like words, their tongue just starts to become on fire, their body is just fizzing with rage, all of these years of unspoken truths, boundaries they haven't been able to uphold. So perimenopause is often, really compared to PMS, and just also how misunderstood and how feared and how demonized PMS is. And so, of course, women moving through perimenopause, oh, just go on the HRT, oh, just go on the coil, anything to avoid feeling it. Same with our PMS, to go on the pill, take some paracetamol, just numb it away. But actually, it's like part of the dark feminine is come into the pain, come into the fire, fucking feel it. Dare to be cracked open, dare to actually look at what is causing you this inner turmoil, because actually that's what we need to look at. And I see this, again, this real rejection of anything that is difficult, anything. There's just this real bypassing of like so much of what being human is about is suffering and pain and hardship, but we're so averse to going into those dark places.
Imagine if we had community. Because I get it. It's like during the luteal phase, during perimenopause, things that were easy to mask, things that were easy to say, okay, I'll shelf this conversation because it's a hard one and I'll shelf it for a later time, they are unavoidable. Our hormones tank and we cannot avoid the hard conversations, and then it's looked at as pathology again. Well, you're on your period, your period's coming. Let's just dismiss it. And I'm even tapping into like a sense of rage around that too, because it's just, oh well, it's her time of the month, or it's just so passed over. And it's like, no, those are all the things that her hormones have allowed her to suppress, because you're right, each cycle, falls in line with the cycles of the earth. There's a time to be vibrant. There's a time to touch into your sexuality, but there's also a time to examine right before our bleed. What is it working for us right now? What do we need to shed and bleed out and let go of? And we've forgotten that that is a time to look at that destructive aspect of ourselves and say, what do we need to dismantle in our lives and release during our bleed so that we can come into a deeper sense of our wholeness, to a deeper sense of our authenticity? And I think women who I see really struggle with perimenopause have probably suppressed that throughout their entire life and are just now coming into this place where it can no longer be ignored. And so it's like this intentional cosmic platform to examine these things. And it can be very, very difficult. I think that's why they call it a midlife crisis, right? It's not a crisis. It's really a shedding. It's a becoming. But we have no socially accepted container to do that in.
Yeah. And we lack the role models as well. If we've never seen our mum get angry, or our granny or our aunt or anyone around us exhibit healthy rage or healthy boundaries or healthy, just anything other than just putting a smile on your face and just pretending everything's okay, everything's fine. If we're not given a role model, we don't know what to do or how to follow it. So when we do meet the rage, we have a lot of it is just like, oh my God, I have all this shame. And so what women learn to do is we just get depressed. We cry. That's socially acceptable way for women to exhibit that something's wrong.
Yes.
Whereas for men, it's socially acceptable for them to go punch a wall or a face for some reason. And it's like, why is it not socially acceptable to see a woman having a tantrum? And it's like, even the way that we parent young kids now, parent, I don't have kids, but there's so much change in parenting around, a million people are telling you a million things of how to do. But I see, a lot of beautiful conscious moms are creating space for their kids to express their emotions, because they've seen and they've lived through, having boomer parents, what happens to us when we aren't shown how safe it is to express our emotions. We have to go through a whole awakening when we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s, because we haven't had that, that parenting. So it is really beautiful. I do believe that the next generation is really changing, but there's still a lot of work to do in normalizing, making space to feel it all.
That's it. I love how Your process, like, your personal process is just so parallel to like the larger process as a whole. Because I think that there's a really universal quality to healing, which is, oh, I have to recognize it. I have to see it within myself. And once I recognize it, I have to kill it. We have to die. And then we can rebirth. And then we kind of know ourselves as creator with our sovereignty and our agency and our autonomy. And I could really see that arc in your story of becoming. And how did you integrate? Like, I mean, because sometimes it's hard to step back into society and the confines knowing what you know. I mean, even our calendar is like messed up. And it used to be, that we had 13 months that matched women's 13 cycles throughout the year. And even that got all screwed up somehow. It should just be 28 days, 13 months. It's just so ingrained in our society to, like you said, invert it. Knowing what you knew, going through that phase in Costa Rica of just being like, I'm going to kill it all, reject it all. How did you then come back into society, be like, okay, I'm moving back to the UK. I'm going to buy a home. I'm going to integrate this. What did that look like for you?
I mean, don't get me wrong, it has been challenging.
Yeah.
There have been many times where I've wanted to like pack up and leave and move to Ibiza or move to Mexico or move to wherever else, not being here. But I got to a point when I was in Costa Rica, and I remember exactly when it happened. I was riding my bike to go and teach a yoga class, and I just had this real feeling of like, I've hit my ceiling here. Like I've learned the lessons that I've learned here. I need to go and take what I've learned and share them with somewhere else. And at the time we were looking to move to Canada. And then ended up in the UK. And it was almost like I felt like the UK needed it so much, because where I was in Costa Rica, I was in a little bubble, and everybody, was just really in their spiritual path and had, left the system consciously. And so it was like a little echo chamber of everybody knowing, the truth of the world. And so taking a, conscious decision to come back and actually being the black sheep, where my friends are very different, my old friends are very different to who I am now. And so having like really slowly to go and find community, and bumping up against a lot of people who, I mean, the UK is a really patriarchal place, that we were like one of the biggest colonizers ever. And so we have like a real dense masculine energy I feel in this country. And so kind of bringing the feminine to this place especially, like, has been a little bit like edgy, has felt edgier than maybe some other places. But it's kind of like, I believe that paths choose us, we don't choose the path.
Agree. Yes.
So sometimes I'm like, oh, I'd fucking rather be on a beach somewhere where life is really chill and easy. But it's like, okay, well, I'm here now, and
Yeah.
how can I bring what I know? And, I may face some resistance. Like, I get people, not a lot, but like some people who just want to write fucking random things on Facebook to me sometimes. And it's like, why? They're so activated and triggered by some of the things that I offer, the words, like, I have an offering called the Pussy Project. And just some people are like, can't say that on Facebook. And I'm like, oh my God.
It's such a mirror, isn't it? I mean, I think when somebody has any kind of strong emotional reaction, it's like, ooh, well, that you couldn't just scroll. You couldn't just scroll past, which means it really triggered something within you that probably needs to be explored, liberated, expressed. It's an interesting thing. And I'm sure it took building some tough skin to be able to recognize that and just kind of move on.
Yeah, and I definitely experienced feelings of like loneliness, and just like nobody understands me. I then also went through a phase of feeling like, I had to hide my gifts or my truth, because I felt really misunderstood, and almost like, kind of, I didn't experience a witch hunt, but in that sense of like that feeling of like almost I could be persecuted for talking about this. And I remember putting posters up in a local where somewhere we were living once, and I was like, just really remember having the fear of being really judged for the work I was doing, and for the words that I was using. And it was like a real thing that I had to work through, of just finding real power and strength in just this work, and being like, well, there's nothing else that I'm going to do or I want to do, so I have to do this, so I have to put the posters up, and I have to keep going. And I am very used to now. Most people go through cycles of like, they'll find me, they'll follow me, I'll trigger them, they'll unfollow me, they'll spend 2 years stalking me quietly. 2 years later, they'll refollow me again, they'll come and join a container. Like that, they're curious, and then they're activated, and then they're like, oh no, 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 this is too much. And then they do their own inner work, and then they kind of like tiptoe back in, and it's like, okay, I'm ready for actually what you're talking about now.
Ooh, I
Because
love that. Mm-hmm.
it is really affronting, especially if you've grown up in, a super controlled household or really in the church. I get a lot of what they call recovering Catholics in my sexuality spaces, especially who, maybe have grown up in Ireland or grown up, really with the church. And they've been told all their life, like, I've just been born guilty. And they just feel like they have so much to feel ashamed of just by being a woman. And
How do
it's
you
so
reframe?
heartbreaking.
Yeah. How do you reframe like that wound of original sin for women?
I mean, it's definitely a long process, and something that we actually really work with in my retreats, where we have the time and we create that container to really go deep and have the softening and have the opening and have the surrendering and have like real full body shifts of just like, coming into full acceptance of their body, of their pleasure. And when you are in a container like that, obviously you are in your little echo chamber where, the kind of the outside threat isn't there. Kind of the work is after moments like that, when you've had the kind of the healing, it's like, okay, well, how do then I integrate and bring this feeling out into the wider world where, as we said at the beginning, maybe my husband doesn't understand, or maybe, I get a lot of women who come to me and it's like, oh, especially quite early on, and they might feel really sexually empowered and they do the lingerie shoots, or they, you know really move into sexual or sensual expression, and then they get people in their DMs sending them dick pics. So it's like,
Yeah.
constantly working on how to manage boundaries, keeping themselves safe, but also creating safety in their bodies and their nervous systems where they feel that they can be unapologetically themselves. Also noticing, when am I still then fawning or falling into a different type of expectation for what a sexy woman looks like. So there's so many little bits and pieces that can still come up along someone's journey of sexual empowerment. So they might do the inner healing and heal that kind of split, or find, acceptance of being born a woman,
Mm.
and then be like, woohoo, I feel amazing. And then, constantly get these little like obstacles of like, okay, well, how confident do you feel? How can we really anchor into safety? How can we still move just into, your unapologetic expression? Because
Yeah. It's brave, and there's a nervous system expansion that has to take place. It's like you said, there's a safe container and it's safe to hold it there, but you go out into the world and you have to have an expanded capacity to hold what comes at you and then be able to use your voice to have the boundaries. I mean, it is a whole process.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it can take it for some, it can take months, for some it can take years, decades. Everybody is really working to their own journey, but I've seen it hundreds of times. It's so possible to move from complete sexual shutdown or complete internalized shame actually into full-bodied self-acceptance and, liberated erotic expression. It's so powerful. And that feeling of, when a woman can actually anchor into her self and like be running naked and free in a retreat, it's like, sometimes just seeing a version of a woman coming in on day one and then the version of a woman leaving on day six is like,
Oh.
you wouldn't at the airport, they'd be turned away, their passport picture would look so different. They've just had like
Mm.
full like shift.
That's incredible. I can't even imagine that sense of like liberation and safety. Kudos to you, because you must be creating a deep, deep sense of safety to allow that expression of liberation. That's beautiful. And I had a question, it's losing me in regard to that. So, what advice would you give to women who are sitting here listening and just dropping into this awareness of these golden bars that you had talked about, right? And they're like, oh gosh, yeah, I didn't realize that those were here, but I'm listening to this conversation. They're here. What are like the first steps that somebody can do?
I mean, a few things I'm thinking of now. really maybe starting on a mental level, like tracing back and understanding whose voice is that
Mm,
tells me I'm wrong, or tells me I'm should be ashamed of my body, or tells me my pleasure is wrong. Because it's usually either your dad, your mom, somebody from like, way back when, who's planted a little seed that's stuck and that's grown roots and takes up too much space in your brain and is really blocking your self-expression. And then I would move into the body, into the soma, and actually very, very gently start to develop just a deeper connection to your body. And it doesn't have to have anything to do with your genitals, anything to do with your sexuality, but actually begin this process of like full body reclamation. Because for so many women, they're just so disconnected, like we were speaking about, from the head down, and the relationship that they do have with their body is often distorted. We're starving ourselves, we're punishing ourselves with exercise or food. We have a really unhealthy relationship, most women, at least at some point, with our bodies. So there is a shit ton of like, self-love, self-acceptance, forgiveness that needs to come in along the way, healing of trauma if that's happened, to start to kind of like, kind of fill in the little holes, or like patch yourself up from
right.
feeling, because a lot of women say that they feel broken. I hate that word. So I like to like imagine that you're putting like little band-aids on you and just kind of like making yourself whole again. You're already whole, but like the feeling of like containment, like I've got you, that I'm connected. And so I would also say, buy a full length mirror, because also for a lot of women, they just look at themselves like this when they're brushing their teeth or putting their makeup on. They never actually fully look at themselves head to toe naked. And that is a really important part, to just like start to actually see your whole body, and use your hands or use like some oil or massage oil and actually go around your whole body and be like, this is my arm, this is my hand, this is, and actually feel the boundaries of your skin and feel everything, head to toe, so that you are actually bringing all of yourself together. You're piecing all of yourself back together.
Ooh, that's
And then,
powerful.
and then from that place, you can start to maybe feel into a, if I'm ready for pleasure, let me go on a journey of firstly sexualizing pleasure. Because for a lot of people, we have a tricky relationship even with pleasure, because we think it has to be in exchange for something or with someone. And actually, we forget that we have like our whole body is an erogenous zone, that we have pleasure available to us in any moment, and it has got nothing to do with our pussy. So there's
Mm,
so much redefining that has to happen on the way, and unlearning, to actually, what just mostly happens is like come back to like basics and come back to like real foundations, where you get to create different definitions of words. You get to create the language that you use around your body. And then that really is the way to just start being able to enjoy spending more time in this beautiful vessel. And
yeah,
then you can start to get a little bit more edgy, and then you can start to get a little bit more playful or more sexual. But we can't like run before we're walking.
that's
you know
it.
if we're so disconnected, we're not going to be able to think about having full orgasmic experiences if there's like a deep sticky traumatic event that's still an imprint that we need to tend to.
Absolutely. I love that as a first step. It's so sensual and it's so mindful, just being able to sit with your body and honor it as the vehicle that's taking us through life and nothing more. And just, I love the visual of putting ourselves back together. I look at that's kind of how I see it too. It's like, it's fragmentation, it's little pieces of ourselves that were kind of splintered off that we get to reclaim and embody again. And it's a beautiful journey. You had said something earlier. You had said that, women are the shamans. And I couldn't agree more. And I think that part of the issue with religion is that it, again, suppressed the feminine from it, because the feminine is the one who receives visions and messages and communes with the other side naturally. And that's been delegated to the men, to the priests. And we have this very structured idea of religion that, again, is very masculine. It's like we have the container without prophecy. And it feels like the work that you're doing is just like healing these witch wounds, these patriarchal suppressions in religion. Because I believe that when one woman heals, her posterity heals and her ancestors are watching, and that they're healing as a result. I believe the work you're doing leaves a ripple that goes out in both directions. And I'm wondering, how do you find when you're working with women, it restores their shamanic abilities and their intuition?
Yeah. I mean, when we start to work really with our bodies and when we start to drop our awareness into our pelvic bowl and spend time living in our root and spend time working with our wombs. Our womb is our center of intuition. And the more also that we work with pleasure is a down regulator, and women are driven by oxytocin. And so the more that we can actually understand our female biology and the way that our female nervous systems work, the more we activate different channels in the body, the more our nervous system is actually more receptive to creative downloads. Our default mode network, part of our brain, switches on, which is the part of the brain responsible for intuition and imagination. So like actually the more that we are in our feminine and in our practice and in our pleasure, the more we're in our power and the more tapped in we are to source. So the more actually then we can receive the downloads. And so spending time or carving out time to be with other women, but also by yourself and being in practice and listening to listen to the inner whispers. There's so much of our body's knowing that we just don't listen to or don't trust because we've gone to a doctor and they diagnosed us as something else and they've given us a pill for it, when we're actually like, oh no, but we've all had that one time we've gone and we're like, no, I feel that there's something wrong, or I feel that there's something off. And we've been given this like just bandage to put on it, and we're never actually dealing with the root cause. And so for a lot of us, we actually have to listen and build that trust back to listen to our bodies, because our body is communicating with us all the time. Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of women, we miss those intuitive hits, which is why sometimes we don't see or feel the red flags in the dodgy partner, or we overstep a boundary or something, because we're not really attuned to what's happening in our body and our system. We're overriding our systems all the time. We're running on, we're super activated, we're driven by dopamine, and all of these things are actually they're just stopping us from truly living in our
yeah, absolutely. Well said. Fiona, where can people find you if they're like, I need to work with this woman, I want to explore myself, my divinity, my authenticity? How can they work with you?
You can come and find me on Instagram at Fiona McCoss. That's where all my content and vibes are. You can come to my website, and that's where all of my offers are. I actually have some spaces open to one-to-one coaching as well. So if anyone's feeling called to go deeper into a one-to-one container, then I would absolutely love to support you around all of the topics that we've spoken about. Detoxifying from the patriarchy and landing yourself back in your body is like my absolute jam. And if you feel called to step into a retreat and come go really deep with me in person, I've got retreats in Ibiza and Greece this year. So yeah, lots of different spaces that you can come find me.
Beautiful. Thank you. Fiona, this conversation is so critically important. Thank you so much for being on today and for sharing everything that you've learned with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved it. Yeah, thank you so much. It's a joy to just bring the truth, and just, it's really just bringing the truth. It's helping more women just like take the veil away, rip off those rose tinted glasses, and actually just see through the bullshit and just reclaim our power.
Girl, it's time. It's 2026. The patriarchy's falling, so we might as well step up. It's time.
Get on board. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, everybody.
Thank you so much.